We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Changing the Game. My name is Jordan Duran. I am a career coach here at Shift Group. We help athletes and veterans at Shift Group transition into their next role in sales. With only 30% of all sales roles being held by women, Changing the Game aims to highlight female sales leaders who are making meaningful change in the space. Today, I am joined by Porchia Jenkins. She is a multi-sport athlete and she's a sales and people leader over at Brex. But before that, she spent a long time working in the education space before taking the leap into sales. So I'm so excited to have you here today, Porchia. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the invite, Jordan. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. If anyone has any questions throughout the show, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Always happy to refer to those if anyone has any thoughts. So yeah, awesome. Let's kick it off. Let's get started. I would love if you could just provide a brief overview of your background and your current role in sales.
Yeah, so like as Jordan mentioned, I started out as a three-sport athlete, all the way through college actually, and then I decided to just really focus on school. So went to school for kinesiology, was a teacher for about 10 years before deciding to make the transition to sales. And honestly, the impetus behind that was COVID. Like it was an opportunity that I felt like at that moment it could go either direction. And I felt like that was the time to like really take the leap of faith at all times. But I was really confident in my abilities. So what I did was, I want to talk a little bit about this later, but I went to a tech boot camp and decided to basically learn how to be an SDR. And I got my first SDR role soon after that, leaving education. And, it was pretty much spent the last 4 years like working my way up and from SDR team lead to an actual people leader now at Brex.
That's amazing. I love your journey. Talk about making a couple different transitions and not, having the sales background right away. That's so cool. I'd love if you could share what you do at Brex and I guess, explain what Brex does to the audience.
Yeah, so I'm currently the growth SDR manager at Brex, and we are all in one consolidated corporate card, and expense and expend platform. So my job as an SDR manager is to get my people prepared to be able to generate net new opportunities and acquisitions of new customers. And our focus point is to ensure like we generate high revenue, but also like we're developing future leaders to move into other positions in our business. And I love this role specifically, and why I feel like I kind of was made for this role was because in education it was very similar. Getting students acclimated, building them up to be able to move on to the next level was a huge part of my career, and why I felt like the transition to sales and even now working at Brex, it kind of are hand in hand. Even starting out as an entry role, it was kind of tough to see people to see like education or a teacher being able to like do that job. But now, like doing it for a couple of years and now seeing like the impact of it, I think that there's a strong correlation, and also like how it's impacting like my ability to be a people leader today.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions. I kind of want to dig a little
Oh.
deeper into that. No, I love it. You're like 2 steps ahead of me. Would love if you could dig a little bit more into your background in education and how you feel that really helped prepare you for a role in
Yeah.
sales and prepare you to be a sales leader.
I think early on, I had the same question too, but at the same time, like what transferable skills, can I leverage in this new space that really helped me to be a good SDR? And I jokingly said before I even became an SDR, I'm like, I want to be a BDR manager. And they're like, well, you got to be a BDR manager or SDR or BDR first. And I'm like,
Yeah.
semantic. I'll figure that out. Like it doesn't, I'll get there. And so for me, like I knew like I was a three-sport athlete. So I've always been a team oriented person, very curious about learning. I knew what it meant to like practice and like really have that grit and motivation. And I think really truly like believing in myself. And so I knew like, hey, you give me the game plan and what I need to do to study and learn, like I'm fully capable of doing that. And I felt like that was how I made the leap. People will say like you literally left a 10-year career to start over as an entry level role. And it was like, well, that is also how I've defined my ability to be able to manage people, is that I understand firsthand like the things that they are going through and have gone through. And
Yeah.
like they continuously teach me, kind of the neural ways of things I don't get to experience every single day, but it's a shared learning experience. And so that was a lot of education. It's like making iterations on things that have been done continuously to make sure that it's meeting the people where they're at. And I think a lot of those skill sets I use every single day with my team. And like as I continue to like build my career, like I lean back toward those things that made me a really good educator that are making me a really good leader and now in sales.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit so many awesome points there. I wanna go back to your experience as a multi-sport athlete
Yeah.
and how I just love if you could share your background there, the sports you played, and then really how that, uh, influenced your approach to sales and leadership as well.
Yeah, so basketball was my first love. You couldn't tell me I was not going to be in the WNBA when I was in like fifth grade on. And
But
so throughout like middle school and high school specifically, like really was really into that. And then there came the time where coaches like you got to be conditioned for basketball season where there's like fall that comes in between that. So it was like either you run cross country or you're gonna play volleyball. And I was like, I'm not a distance runner, so I'm gonna try the
so
volleyball. I
funny.
played it, but recreationally, right? And so I ended up like trying out for the team. They'd already set teams. I was like, Coach, can you please just let me try out? Like, I really need to make this team because I don't want to run cross country. And so
Yeah.
they ended up letting me try out, and I was really good actually in that. So good, in fact, they actually a club team from another school, another head coach was like, I think you should play club. And so I was like, what is this club? It's like AAU. They're like, yes, exactly. So I ended up playing club like all 4 years of high school. I ended up playing intercollegiate volleyball. Actually, I didn't actually play on the collegiate team, but basically it was a travel team.
Yeah.
And so I was a three-sport athlete. So I played softball in the spring. I lived in the Midwest, so weather is typically not that great, April, but you know, when it's nice, it's really nice. So I just started out playing basketball, ended up playing volleyball, and then played softball for fun. And then after I became a teacher, naturally, I just decided to coach all of those things as well. And then also adding boys volleyball to the mix. So I got a both folds of like experiences. So as an athlete, really building up what I call like a competitive drive, not just to compete, but also just to compete with myself. And I think the motivation that I was taught and the grit and the resiliency that I got from playing all three sports, because they all test you very differently,
Totally.
is something that I definitely have taken into other areas of my life. And I often like jokingly say, like, I don't know who I would be if I didn't have sports, because I think you learn so much about yourself, but you also have so many experiences that you typically have just from exposure in each of them. But they really taught me how to compete for myself first, and also like be a competitor, but also stay motivated. And I think grit that comes with it, because you know, especially in sales, you practice a lot. There are a lot of rejections that happen in this space, and it happens daily. And it's something I have to remind myself is like, you know, you've done harder things, and if you can get better, and I constantly remind myself, and I think sports taught me that early on.
Yeah, that is awesome. Love that you did not do cross country and decided to go for volleyball. I can totally relate to that. Not a runner whatsoever. Pretended to be a runner, but definitely not. So I totally feel you on that. Um, I love that you said that you dealt with like the competitiveness really prepared you for success in sales, and it taught you that grit piece. What piece of advice would you give candidates or salespeople out there who are facing that rejection and maybe needing a little bit of a lift and a push forward? Like, what advice would you give them to keep pushing through and finding that grit?
Yeah, I think we have to take failure. Typically, we're taught failure is something's wrong with you, right? And honestly, I think failure is an opportunity to have a teachable moment. Like, what is missing versus something's wrong with me, right? And so, a lot of times when I think about the SDR role, you know, it may not all be you. It could be very situational that has something to do with the prospect, and thinking about even interviewing for a job. Like it may not be a fit, and that's okay. Like you want to find a place and you want to find somewhere where it is, and there's no question. But what in this experience can I learn from this no? Right? Always being okay to learn from a no is the thing that is the resiliency piece, right? Like what is
Yeah.
it that I can take away from this experience? First off, that I did well. You always want to start with positive feedback for yourself. So you got to be good to yourself in this as well. What can I learn from this? What did I do well? Okay, I'll keep that. What is it that probably was telling when I get feedback that I can actually go in and actually work on and implement for the next conversation, or when I do have the next prospect on the line, like how can I make sure that I'm improving? So I would say take failure as a teachable moment to really dig deeper and be self-reflective, but also be kind to yourself in that too, because you know we are our worst critics in that. And get a trusted advisor, like somebody that you can go to and like explain these things with a different lens, but that can also give you the feedback that you probably may not have for yourself if that self-reflective piece is not there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think that applies to so many areas in our career. Like, be willing to learn from no, be willing to learn from maybe, hey, maybe it wasn't a good fit for you. Maybe it's not you in the situation. Maybe it was the prospect and we could learn something from this and make it
Exactly.
well. I think that's awesome. Awesome advice. Um, Speaking of giving, leadership growth advice to the new generation of salespeople, you are interviewing salespeople all the time. I would love if you could share something that you look for in candidates in that interview process or attributes you also avoid.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that with top of funnel selling, like you have to be having the ability to really make a connection quick. Like the first 30 seconds, like people in, especially if you're on a phone, like you have to be able to have a presence about yourself that very much so will resonate with this person. Like, people say the permission based opener or like, hey, can you help me kind of opener. But it's also after you capture their attention, like your ability to have a conversation. So when you're interviewing,
Mm,
let your interview know you, but you can also capture their attention because essentially that's a cold call. I don't know you, right? And it's your opportunity to make an impression. It's very similar to cold calling. So really having strong skill sets that are going to help you in building rapport. Have actual tangible evidence or examples of things. People will say, I have grit. Okay, can you give me an example of that? Right? Have a story attached to it. A lot of what we do in sales is tell stories. We typically tell them about our solution and our actual business, but ultimately, interview is the same thing. You need to be able to tell a story about yourself and how you got to a result. The STAR method is huge. And I find that sometimes people will say things like, oh, I was the best, or they'll say, I was in the top five. If you were number one, I wouldn't even count two, three, four, and five. If you're number one, you're going to say you're number one. So obviously, you're probably the
right.
fifth person. So, making sure that if you're going to say something like that, be honest. Like, hey, you know what? I was fifth. I had some really strong people, but I learned from them. And here's how they pulled me up. And here's how I was able to collaborate to get to where they were to stay in the top five at least. Have something like that, right? And I think you can pick it up really, really quickly when there's eagerness and when there's like people who really want to jump in and do the job, but they also can tell a really solid story about themselves. I think the thing that's kind of a red flag for me is when people kind of jump in and immediately want to know about career progression without actually like knowing about the current role and what it takes to be successful. It's a difference if you ask like things that build up to that point. But if this is your first job and like the one thing I would want to focus on is getting really, really good at the job that I'm doing first, but that there's understanding that there's career opportunities down the line. But I want to know what is going to make me great today so that when we get to that point where I can really focus on honing in that side of the thing, then I'm going to do that because I know I've done everything well, but I'm aware of it. So when immediately it's like, hey, how do I get to the next role? Like right out the gate. And it's kind of like, okay, we didn't even ask any questions about like, what does it take to be successful in current
Yeah.
times? So I think it's where it's positioned. You should be career oriented and you should have a wherewithal about what the next steps are, but just wanting to make sure like you have a good, clear understanding of what it takes to be successful current date, I think is way more important in some instances because that's going to be the thing you have to deal with within the next year or a little bit longer, depending on the promotion path. So understanding that first, I think is way more important.
Yeah, I think that is awesome advice. Thank you so much for that, Portia. And I want to go back to when you talked about really what we do in sales is tell stories, and candidates have to be able to go into those interviews and tell a clear story about their skills. I have a lot of candidates who I work with who are maybe transitioning from their athletic career or their military career for the first time, and they've been told so many times, "Hey, it's about the team. It's not about you." And so they have a hard time formulating this story about themselves in a way that
Hmm.
they feel comfortable with, and it doesn't feel like their egos talking or whatever it is. Um, I would love if you could describe, you mentioned the STAR method. So if you could talk a little bit about the STAR method and then I guess how you formulated or how you developed the ability to tell a really strong, compelling story about yourself.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand for one when you're doing your like research on the company, understanding what their values are, I think is going to be key. Like, are we doing the research to see the interviewing manager's profile. Like, what are they mentioning that's there? What are the values of the company? What are the people that are in the seat like have on their profiles? Understand like surface level, like what is happening and what they value based on what you're analyzing. Again, that's prospecting 101 as well. So you're sharpening your skills in prospecting as well. But I also think too, like, as much as we want somebody that is team oriented, you are an individual when it comes to your performance. So being able to have the skill sets to perform as an individual, but contribute to the team is ultimately like what the job is. So understanding like what are the values here? Do they align? And also like how do I tell a compelling story about myself? And how does this fit in the development of the team? I think every manager wants every person they come into not only to do their job very, very well, but contribute to their growing community and be able to reiterate like best practices and that you're bringing in something that's going to help the team grow. So you being able to share like instances where you've been able to do that, but also how your determination is ultimately going to help drive other people and your experiences are going to help drive other people is a way to talk about yourself without feeling like you're bragging or feeling like it's ego attached to it. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be the person that's doing the performance and you're going to have these things to stand on. You're not going to have a team on the call with you. You're going to be making the call by
Yeah.
yourself.
Wow.
So it's okay to have that ability to say like, one of the things that drives me is like my ability to hit goals. Like, so here's the goals that I set for myself. And when I do look at the leaderboard, if I see that somebody else is ahead of me, I need to pick it up because I should be before them. If I'm like on Eastern time and they're in the Pacific, like you can have in little small competitive things that contribute to the pushing of the team, but that are also driving you as an individual. So being able to say that concisely though, I'm a competitor, but at the end of the day, like I know that what I do contributes to this team and how we function. I want to create an environment where they're able to learn from me and I'm able to learn from them, but also put these things in action so that I can ultimately hit my goal, which also improves the team's goal. Right. So that's taking like a twofold approach, but also saying that I'm also goal oriented. I'm driven by myself and I also am competing with
Mhm.
myself while taking, these pushes from my teammates as well into consideration of that competition, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know JR, our founder here at Shift, has said something like, you need the team to succeed. I think he says this in our training, but you need the team to succeed, but you need to be that much better than the person next to you so you get more playing time. It's kind of like
Exactly.
that mentality. Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
And that's true. That's the truth. And I think when you play on team sports, that's ultimately like the no, like that's the truth. Like you need to be better than the next person. But I also think that you should also situationally be prepared for either way. Like, hey, I'm not the best at this and be very self aware. Like, you need a three from the half court. I'm not shooting that shot. You need to put James in. Like, and it's okay to like say that. You're not doubting yourself. It's just the ability to be self-reflective. And I don't think a lot of times growing up in sports, we were taught that we were just basically comparing ourselves to each other to be like, oh, I'm not as good as because I'm not in. And it's like, well, there are also situations that you are better suited for as well. And I think that is what life taught me on top of like understanding like how to be competitive is that like let's situationally like you may be better than this person or that person may be better than you can still learn and you can still practice but that's still also something you should be thinking about as well.
Yeah, we all have different strengths and there's opportunities to lean on our teammates when we need the lift too. So,
And that's the team component. Hey, I may not be as sharp in this area but I know Greg is, so I'm going to go spend some time with him so he can show me his ways and I'm going to show him how to do this. That's the team component. I'm not too high up that I don't know how to ask for help or I don't have opportunities where I'm also sharing best practices to also support other people, right? So you can still be really, really good at something and still be a really good teammate and it not be so to the point where you're not sharing the secret sauce is what I
right.
used to call it.
Yeah, yeah, and I love this topic. We've obviously learned a lot from our athletic backgrounds, bringing that into the professional world. Are there any other specific lessons from athletics that you found particularly beneficial in your sales career or from
Yeah.
education?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, believing in yourself is the first step into you taking any chances in this sales role, speaking to like, the folks that are trying to transition into the space and even people that are in the role right now. Sales is a high, low, ebbs and flows. You're gonna have really great days, you're gonna have really bad ones. But believing in yourself to know like I've done this before, I'm capable of doing this, or if I do need to learn something, it's possible like I think is the biggest driver of your ability to be successful in this space. Yes, you can be a top performer, and we all want you to be a top performer, but there will be times where you're not the one that's leading the charge. Like, how are you responding then? Right, at your toughest days, at your best days, more than likely you're gonna be great. But then when you hit a low, like, how are you also ensuring that you stay, I say, middle of the road, right? And so
Yeah.
believing in yourself, making sure you're constantly learning. Like, when we get jobs, we're all eager to like jumping in. We have these notebooks with all the notes in, and then all of a sudden we're doing the job. We get so busy that we're just focusing on doing the job. Always carve out time to be an expert at your craft, right? Whether that's the storytelling, whether that's the persona, product knowledge, like make sure you're setting time aside to be the very best at what you do, whether it's soft skills or it's like
Mhm.
business specific. Like, take the time to be able to continue to invest in yourself, because there will be a time where people won't. You're just going to be expected to do the job and that's it. But you have to take that extra step. You're going to be tired to go read and listen to those podcasts and go take the extra time to read those pitch decks and listen to those demo calls. Like, investing in yourself and believing in yourself, I think, is the biggest advice that you can act on today that doesn't need anybody else except for you in order for you to drive success in your career.
Yeah. Are there any resources that you would recommend anyone listening go to
Oh,
sharpen skills or anything? And if there's not, that's okay if there's nothing top of
Oh
mind,
no,
but
I'm just thinking, I'm like, there's so many, right?
so
Like, there's so
many.
many podcasts out there. Oh, everybody has an opinion. And I think the biggest thing is that you just, I would say, when it comes to consuming content, is be careful of people who are selling all this. Most everybody right now, AI is
Yeah,
embedded in most things that we're reading. I think the fundamental skills of doing this job are probably the most important. So find somebody who speaks to, like, not only understanding the fundamentals of this job, but also the evolution of what it takes to be successful current day, right? Like, I think you need to be able to take the baseline skill set, what it takes to be successful in sales. Again, that's going to be cold calling, that's going to be strong writing skills. You're going to have ability to build rapport, a lot of EQ, IQ. Like, as much as, like, you don't have to necessarily be the smartest person in the room, but you need to be able to read a room. And I think a lot of people like disregard that because they know so much about certain things. But if you can't actually form a relationship or have a conversation with a person, it doesn't matter what you know. And so, really taking the opportunity to really dig into persona matrix. Like, who are you selling to? If you're interviewing, who am I interviewing? Like, you need to know, understand what kind of makes that person tick on that surface level, and like what they actually
right.
care about in order to do those kind of things. So I would say podcasts that really speak to you developing those sharp skills for people development, and understanding how to be more people oriented. And as you get into a specific industry, like, take heed from the people who are industry leaders. You want to learn, if your company is not the industry leader, like, making sure you're learning from the people who are and understanding how they're doing it and finding success would be like the next step. And
Yeah.
always have like a read, like something like whether you're building a skill set that is not only specific to your job, but can help, again, build you and invest in you in the next steps.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. Thank you. I'm like thinking of my next steps for for some development. So I love it. No, that's awesome. Thank you. I would also like to know any challenges that you encountered during your transition from education to sales or athletics to sales.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've experienced, sadly, is like, this thing of being the only, right? And I think it started in sports, and so naturally, like, when you find yourself in these situations where you're the only, you just kind of like. And for me, I decided a long time ago, and it was the club opportunity. Actually, was the first time where I was on the team, and I'm like, wow, this is like culture shock for me. But as we started to travel more, and even when I got to college, it was like I made a decision that I'm not going to let this be the determining factor of whether or not I find success. I'm not going to feel uncomfortable in situations where I'm clearly capable and being able to be myself. And so I really committed to that early on. It's like, I'm not going to allow myself to be less than or feel less than just simply because of these surroundings. And I think that that really helps me a lot when transitioning to tech, is because that was clearly the case in most of these opportunities, is where I was the only of some sort. And to me, it's like, I'm going to make sure I do my very best. I'm going to present myself as myself. And my best advice for somebody is, like, if you don't feel that you can present your best self at any place or space, like, that's not the space or place for you. And so when I
Yeah.
think about tech sales now, I'm very fortunate that that isn't the case at my current company, and I do think I get to do my best work because of the case of that. But also, like, now my mission in sales and my mission is to have opportunities like this to be able to speak to folks and people to be aware of like be aware of your surroundings, but it is not a defining moment for you. But also you then become a person who's in a leadership position or in a position of change to be able to make that look a lot different or be a lot different from somebody else. That's the opportunity to, as I say, as you climb you lift, right? And you should be
Yes.
making opportunities and helping other people not feel that way, but also like having a seat at the table. No, I want to have a voice at the table, and I think that's the difference. And I've learned that very early on with sports and throughout my career. Just made sure it wasn't a defining moment that was very limiting to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you climb, you lift. That is going to stick with me. And amazing advice to anyone who is seeing themselves as the only in any way at the table. Hey, maybe you need a different table at times, but as you climb, you lift. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
it. No, that is
yeah.
awesome.
Appreciate it. And I think it's one of those things too that comes like, right, you're not gonna know it right off the bat. This is a like moment that you have to do that. But I think for me, like I'm super passionate about that, and I'm very passionate about women in sales and being in sales. And I know that it takes a village because you need to have an advisory board and you need to have a diverse advisory board. And when I say that, because some of my best mentors have been both men and women, and it
Mhm.
takes an opportunity to be able to have a perspective, and but also like you can learn from everyone. It doesn't have to clearly look
Yes.
one way or the other, but I think it's a strengthening of like ideas from different perspectives that help you form a holistic perspective, but also to make better impact. And so for me, like as
Yes.
I think about that statement, but also now how different that my advisory board looks, right? Like how many people that I've like been able to pull into my network that have come from very different backgrounds than myself, excuse me, and have really poured into me. And I appreciated it and now wanted to do the same thing. But ultimately, like make sure that when you do make those decisions for yourself, you have an advisory board to help advise you so that you're not either leaping or you're not going inward with a lot of your thoughts that are actually happening too.
Yeah, that is so helpful. Building that advisory board so that you have that external resource to go and lean on and check yourself in other areas too. Yeah.
Perfect. Check yourself. I literally said that earlier. I was like, you gotta have some people that can check you, and that's very important.
So true. If you can't surround yourself with people who will be honest to you, it's maybe you need the new advisory board too, or someone else on the advisory board that will be honest to
Agree.
you. So I am so with that. We only have a couple minutes left here, so I
Yeah.
would just love to know. This has been such a great conversation. I'm really enjoying this. So I
Same.
would just love to know in what ways do you think the skills cultivated through athletics or various diverse backgrounds can really benefit women in sales, and what advice would you give to women or anyone considering a career in sales?
I think the biggest thing is that we have to again look at the full picture when you're interviewing for roles in companies. You want to find a place that you will be excited to show up to every single day as your whole self. We're not going to check all the boxes anytime we have a role in mind. And sometimes you do have to develop some skill sets, and that's okay. Shoot your shot, right? Let them tell you no. Like you don't say no to yourself. Let them tell you no, and then you get a why, right? So be okay with asking for feedback because if they can tell you why they're saying no, that's what you go work on. That's that teachable moment. That's the no that's going to give you the information that you need to lock into to really, really be better for the next call. But I think the biggest thing is like shoot your shot, trust yourself, and anything that you've built up into this point, you need to find a place in a space where that's going to be appreciated and it's not going to be looked at as something that is a risk. You want to be somebody's asset when you go into that interview and on that team. And anything that they build into you is only going to help you be 10 times better for their business. So ultimately you want to make sure that alignment's there, but give yourself a shot and don't shoot yourself down. Like make them tell you no, don't tell yourself no.
Yes, I love it. Awesome, awesome advice. Do you have anything else that you want to share with the audience? Or I guess can they follow you on LinkedIn, connect with you there?
Please, I think it's awesome to hear from folks who are interviewing now. As I said, or as Jordan you mentioned, like we are interviewing for roles at my company. So I do do a lot of interviews typically, but I'm always happy to have conversations with folks, and any advice that I can give. I'm not a LinkedIn influencer necessarily, but I definitely try to spend time posting things that I feel very passionate about. But if there's anything that I can ever help with, feel free to connect with me, and I'm always happy to answer questions or give some feedback on things just to help be a resource. And again, lifting as I climb.
Awesome. Lift as we climb. Thank you so much, Portia. This was an amazing conversation. I appreciate your time and I just appreciate your knowledge. So thank you so much.
Appreciate the invite, Jordan. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye.